My name is Lila Bennett. I am 30 years old. And on my wedding day, my fiancé's mother moved my father to a folding table behind the DJ booth because, in her words, bus drivers don't sit with donors. My dad had spent 31 years driving kids to school safely through snow, rain, and roads most people were too scared to take. My mom had sewn 3 wedding dresses in her life, including mine. And yet, at my own reception, they were seated with the photographer, the florist's assistant, and 2 empty vendor plates, while my fiancé's family filled the front tables like they owned the room. I thought that was the worst part. Then I heard my fiancé say, "Just get through tonight. After she signs the license, her father will sign the access deed." That was the moment I realized this wedding was never just a wedding. It was a business transaction. What they didn't know was that 3 hours before I walked down the aisle, I had already locked that access road inside a land trust they could not touch. And by the time dessert was supposed to be served, the investors for their $48 million resort were standing up. My fiancé's mother was crying into a champagne glass, and my father, the bus driver they tried to hide, was the only man in that room with the power to save them. Before I tell you what happened at the microphone, let me take you back to the road my grandfather left behind. I grew up in Ashford, Kentucky, population 12,000 if you count the college kids who leave every summer. My father, Samuel Bennett, drove bus route 17 for the county school district for 31 years. Yellow bus, cracked vinyl seat, thermos of coffee in the cup holder, handwritten route sheet clipped to the dashboard. He knew every kid who got motion sick, every kid whose parents fought in the driveway, every kid who needed an extra minute climbing the steps because their backpack was bigger than their body. He called them all my passengers, like he was flying them across the ocean instead of across 3 country roads and a railroad crossing. My mother, Teresa Bennett, worked alterations out of our laundry room. Prom dresses, church suits, bridesmaid hems, funeral pants, whatever people brought her. She had a Singer sewing machine older than me and a coffee can full of buttons sorted by color. I grew up falling asleep to the sound of that machine humming through the wall. We were not rich. My dad packed the same lunch for 20 years. Bologna sandwich, apple, black coffee. My mom saved wrapping paper if it was still pretty enough to fold. But I never once doubted I was loved. If there was a school play, my parents were there. If there was a fever, my mom slept on the floor beside my bed. If I said I wanted to go to college, my dad picked up summer maintenance shifts at the bus garage without making me feel guilty about it. I became a land use planner for the county at 27. Not glamorous, but important. Zoning maps, environmental reviews, drainage permits, public hearings where angry men in polo shirts yelled about setbacks. I liked it because land tells the truth. People lie all the time. Paperwork tries to lie sometimes. But a deed, a recorded easement, a parcel line from 1964, those things wait quietly until somebody smart enough looks. I met Preston Caldwell at a county planning meeting. His family was trying to get preliminary approval for a luxury lake development called Crown Ridge Resort. 500 acres of lakefront property, private villas, golf course, wellness spa, infinity pool. The kind of project that gets printed on glossy boards with fake smiling families walking fake golden retrievers. Preston was there representing Caldwell Development with his mother, Celeste. Preston was handsome in a way that looked expensive. Navy suit, perfect haircut, watch that probably cost more than my first car. He asked intelligent questions. He remembered my name. After the meeting, he waited near the parking lot and said, "You're the only person in that room who actually understood the drainage issue." I laughed because he was right. We went to dinner that Friday. At first, Preston didn't feel like the men I associated with families like his. He listened. He asked about my parents. He said bus drivers were the backbone of the school system. He complimented my mom's sewing after seeing a photo of a dress she altered. He even came to my parents' house for dinner and ate meatloaf at our little kitchen table without making one joke about paper napkins or mismatched chairs. My dad liked him. That mattered to me. My dad is not suspicious by nature, but he has a quiet radar for men who perform. After Preston left that first night, Dad stood at the sink rinsing plates and said, "He looks you in the eye when you talk. That's good." My mom said, "He said thank you 3 times. That counts." So I trusted Preston. That was my first mistake. I met Celeste Caldwell 2 months later at her home, not house. Home sounds too normal. It was a stone mansion with a circular driveway, white columns, and a fountain in front that looked like it belonged outside a hotel in Italy. Celeste opened the door wearing a cream suit and emerald earrings. She kissed the air beside my cheek and said, "So, you're the county girl. Not Lila, not Preston's girlfriend. The county girl." I smiled because I was nervous. She gave me a tour of the house like I was a reporter there to write a feature. Formal dining room, wine cellar, piano room, sunroom, guest wing. Then we sat on the patio overlooking the lake property that Caldwell Development wanted to turn into Crown Ridge. Preston squeezed my knee under the table when Celeste said things like, "Your father still drives a bus at his age?" And, "Your mother does sewing from home? How industrious." He whispered later, "She's old-fashioned. Don't take it personally." I wanted to believe him. That phrase became the glue holding my denial together. Don't take it personally. When Celeste corrected my pronunciation of hors d'oeuvres, don't take it personally. When she told me the wedding should be elevated beyond local traditions, don't take it personally. When she referred to my parents as sweet working people, don't take it personally. When she told me my mom's handmade veil was charming but perhaps better for the rehearsal dinner, don't take it personally. By the time Preston proposed, I had become fluent in explaining away insults. The proposal happened at the Caldwell Lake property. Sunset, candles, a photographer hiding badly behind a pine tree, Preston on one knee with a ring that made my hand look like it belonged to someone else. I said yes. Celeste cried. Richard Caldwell, Preston's father, clapped his son on the back like he had just closed a merger. That night, my dad hugged Preston and said, "Welcome to the family." Preston hugged him back. I replay that sometimes. Not because I miss Preston, because I wonder when he started lying. Wedding planning began the next week. Celeste took over like a military commander in pearls. Venue, guest list, florist, menu, band, photographer. She said she was helping. Helping looked a lot like erasing. My parents offered to pay for something, anything. My dad had saved $9,000 in a credit union account labeled Lila one day. I didn't know about it until he showed me the statement with a shy little smile like a boy offering flowers. "Not much," he said. "But maybe it covers the cake or music." I cried in the grocery store parking lot after he told me. Celeste accepted the money for family contribution optics, which should have been the second warning siren. She put it toward the catering deposit and then told me, "That was sweet of them. People like to feel included. People like to feel included." My father drove a bus for 31 years and saved $9,000 $5 at a time so his daughter could have a beautiful day. Celeste treated it like a participation trophy. Then came the land. 2 months before the wedding, Dad asked me to come by after work. He was sitting at the kitchen table with an old metal lockbox in front of him, the kind with a tiny key and a handle on top. My mom stood at the sink pretending not to listen. Dad opened the box and pulled out a yellow folder. "Your grandpa left this," he said. Inside were deeds, survey maps, and a faded photograph of my grandfather standing beside a dirt road with a shovel over his shoulder. Bennett Road. I knew the road, sort of. It ran along the back edge of the old Bennett farm, cutting through pine woods toward Lake Mercer. When I was little, Dad would drive it in his pickup and tell me his father cleared it by hand. I thought the land had been sold years ago. Most of it had, but not the road. My grandfather had kept a 14-acre strip that included Bennett Road and the old drainage corridor leading into the lake. It was ugly land to most people. Gravel, trees, slope, runoff ditch, a little wooden bridge over a creek. But legally, it mattered. A lot. Dad slid the deed toward me. "It's in my name now. Your grandpa wanted it protected. I'm putting it in yours." I looked up. "Dad, why?" He rubbed his thumb along the table edge. "Because people with money have been sniffing around it for years. I don't trust them, and you understand land better than I do." My stomach tightened. "Who's been sniffing around?" He hesitated. "Caldwell Development sent a letter last year. Wanted to discuss access improvements." Caldwell Development, Preston's family. I read the letter that night. It was polite, vague, corporate. Caldwell Development was seeking cooperation regarding future improvements to a private access corridor adjacent to proposed Crown Ridge infrastructure. Translation: they needed Bennett Road. I pulled the county maps the next morning, and there it was. Crown Ridge Resort had one major problem. The main entrance they wanted to build from the highway had wetlands on both sides. The state would never approve emergency vehicle access through that route alone. For a resort of that size, they needed a second emergency access road, and the cheapest, cleanest path was Bennett Road. My father's road. The bus driver's road. I called my friend Maya, an attorney who specialized in land trusts. We met 3 days later. She read the deeds, the development maps, and the Caldwell letter. Then she looked at me and said, "Lila, this strip is not worthless. It is leverage." "I don't want leverage. I want to get married." "You can do both," she said. "But you need to protect it before marriage, especially if you're marrying into the family that wants it." That sentence sat in my chest for weeks. Maya prepared a transfer into the Bennett Family Conservation Trust. Dad signed first. I signed acceptance. The trust would protect the land from sale, transfer, or easement without unanimous approval from 3 trustees. Me, my father, and Maya as independent trustee. Celeste Caldwell could buy half the county and still not touch Bennett Road without us. The recording was scheduled for the morning of my wedding. Not because I wanted drama. Because Maya said, "If they push you to sign anything after the ceremony, I want this recorded before they can." I didn't tell Preston. That was not a secret. That was self-defense. Wedding day, September 21st. I woke up at my parents' house in the same room where my mother had hemmed homecoming dresses and my father had hung glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling when I was 8. My wedding dress hung on the closet door. Not designer. Not imported. My mother made it. Ivory satin, long sleeves, buttons down the back, lace she had saved from her own wedding dress. I have never worn anything more beautiful. Dad knocked at 7:30 and came in holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You ready, passenger?" he asked. That was what he called me when I was little and rode his bus on snow days. I smiled. Almost. He looked at the dress and swallowed hard. "Your mom outdid herself." "She always does." At 8:04, my phone buzzed. Maya. Recorded. Bennett Family Conservation Trust is official. Nobody touches that road without you. I stared at the message. I didn't know it yet, but that timestamp would save me. The wedding was at the Caldwell-owned Lake Mercer Club. Of course it was. 200 guests, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, string quartet, champagne wall, flower arch, white roses on every table. Celeste had turned the reception into a soft launch for Crown Ridge Resort. Investors were there. Local officials were there. 2 state development people were there. I recognized half the room from planning meetings. This was not a wedding reception. It was a networking event in formal wear. The ceremony began at noon. My father walked me down the aisle. His hands were rough around mine. Clean, but permanently lined from work. He wore a gray suit Mom had tailored herself. His tie was slightly crooked. I fixed it at the end of the aisle before he gave me away. People smiled. Preston teared up. For 1 hour, I believed maybe I had been too cautious. Maybe Maya was wrong. Maybe Celeste was just snobbish, not dangerous. Maybe Preston really did love all of me, including where I came from. Then I walked into the reception hall. The first thing I noticed was the table nearest the stage. Table 1. Reserved for immediate family. Celeste Caldwell, Richard Caldwell, Preston's grandmother, 3 major investors, Senator Bramwell, Mr. and Mrs. Harlan from Harlan Capital. No Bennetts. I found my parents behind the DJ booth, not even at a guest table, at the vendor table. It had a black polyester tablecloth instead of white linen, 2 radio packs, a half-empty water bottle, a plate of sandwiches wrapped in plastic, a small sign that said, "Vendors." My father sat upright with his hands folded. My mother kept smoothing the skirt of the dress she made, like if she made herself smaller and neater, the room might stop humiliating her. I asked the coordinator, "Why are my parents at the vendor table?" She went pale. Mrs. Caldwell said she cleared it with the groom. With the groom, not with me, with Preston. I found him in the side hallway, laughing with 2 groomsmen. I didn't yell. That's not how my family raised me. I said his name once. He turned and saw my face. What happened? "My parents are at the vendor table." His smile vanished, but not from shock, from inconvenience. "Mom had to adjust seating. Some investors came last minute. My parents are not vendors." "I know that." "Then why are they sitting under a vendor sign?" He exhaled. "Lila, please don't make this a thing." The phrase landed like a slap. A thing? Today is important. For who? For us. For my family. For the project. For our future. There it was. The order of importance. His family. The project. Our future. Somewhere after that, my parents. I said, "Move them to table 1. He looked away. I knew before he answered. Table 1 is strategic. Strategic. My father drove children through ice storms. My mother sewed my wedding dress by hand, and Preston called their absence from the front table strategic. Before I could speak, Celeste appeared behind him. "Lila, sweetheart, you look upset. My parents are at the vendor table." She gave a small laugh. "Oh, don't be dramatic, it's a table. They're simple people. They won't care." Simple people. I stepped toward her. My father's name is Samuel Bennett. My mother's name is Teresa. They are not simple people. Celeste's smile thinned. This is exactly the kind of emotional reaction I was trying to avoid. Preston touched my elbow. "Baby, let's get through tonight." "Move them." Celeste looked past me toward the ballroom. "The Harlans are here. Senator Bramwell is here. This is not the time to rearrange optics." I stared at Preston. He said nothing. I walked away before I did something my mother would have to pretend not to enjoy. I went to the restroom hallway to breathe. That was when I heard them. Celeste's voice carried through the slightly open door of the private lounge. "Preston, control this now. After she signs the license, she's your wife. The father will sign the access deed. He drives a bus. He's not going to fight the Caldwell family." Then Preston. "I know, just keep her calm until after dinner." Celeste again. Lower. "Bus drivers don't sit with donors." My body went cold. Not hot, not shaking. Cold. I had spent 2 years telling myself Preston was different from his family. But different men do not stand in rooms while their mothers call your father disposable. Different men do not say, "Keep her calm," like you are a horse before auction. Different men do not plan to use marriage as a tool to get land. I pushed the lounge door open. Celeste turned. Preston froze. I looked at him and said, "The trust recorded at 8:04 this morning." His face changed so fast I almost missed it. Confusion, recognition, fear. Celeste's eyes narrowed. "What trust?" "The Bennett Family Conservation Trust," I said. "The one that owns Bennett Road now." Preston swallowed. Celeste looked at him. "What is she talking about?" I smiled then, not because I was happy, because I finally understood the whole room. "You didn't tell your mother I knew." Preston took a step toward me. "Lila, listen." "No." One word. My mother's favorite word when something costs more than dignity. "No." I walked back to the ballroom. My parents were still at the vendor table. My father had taken the vendor sign and turned it face down. That somehow hurt worse. I went straight to him. "Dad." He looked up. "You okay, passenger?" I almost broke. Almost. "Can you and Mom come with me?" My mother stood immediately. She didn't ask why. Mothers know. The room was beginning to quiet. People noticed the bride walking with her parents from the vendor table toward the stage. Celeste came in behind us, fast. Preston behind her. Richard Caldwell stood from table 1. The band was preparing for the first dance. I took the microphone from the DJ. He let me because DJs understand crisis faster than rich people. "Good evening," I said. The ballroom settled. 200 people, champagne glasses, white roses, development investors, state officials, my mother in the dress she sewed, my father in the suit she tailored, Preston standing 10 feet away, eyes warning me not to continue. I continued. "I want to thank everyone for being here. I know many of you came to celebrate a marriage. Some of you came to discuss a resort." The first ripple moved through the front tables. Celeste's face went still. "Before dinner is served, I need to correct the seating chart." I looked toward the vendor table. My parents, Samuel and Teresa Bennett, were not seated with family today. They were placed at the vendor table behind the DJ booth because someone decided a bus driver and a seamstress didn't belong near donors. The room changed, not loudly. It tightened. People turned. The Harlans looked toward the vendor table. Senator Bramwell lowered his glass. The state development woman opened her folder. I kept going. "My father drove school buses for 31 years. Some of your children rode his bus. Some of your grandchildren did. My mother altered half the dresses in this room, including mine." A woman near the back looked down at her dress. My parents saved $9,000 over many years to contribute to this wedding. Their money helped pay for the food you're about to eat. And today, they were seated under a vendor sign. My mother covered her mouth. My dad stared at the floor. I looked at him and said, "Dad, please look at me." He did. "You belong at table 1 in my life. Always." That was when people started standing. Not everyone, but enough. My aunt, 2 of Dad's old drivers, my mom's friend Carol, then Mrs. Harlan from Harlan Capital. She didn't stand as a protest. She stood slowly, carefully, like a woman realizing she was sitting at the wrong table. Celeste stood too. "Lila," she said sharply, "this is not appropriate." I turned to her. "You're right. It wasn't appropriate when you said bus drivers don't sit with donors." Someone gasped. Mrs. Harlan looked directly at Celeste. Preston stepped forward. "That's out of context." "Then explain the context," I said. "Explain why your mother needed me calm until after I signed the marriage license. Explain why my father was expected to sign an access deed after I became your wife. Explain why Caldwell Development needs Bennett Road for Crown Ridge emergency access." That was the sentence that killed the room, not the insult. The land. Business people can ignore cruelty if they think it won't cost them money. But the second they smell legal trouble, they sit up straight. Mr. Harlan stood beside his wife. "Preston, is the access deed signed?" Preston said nothing. Celeste answered, "It was being handled." Mrs. Harlan's voice was quiet. "That is not an answer." I lifted my phone. Maya had sent me the recorded trust confirmation as a PDF. I had already opened it. At 8:04 this morning, Bennett Road was transferred into the Bennett Family Conservation Trust. No sale, no easement, no access improvement. Nothing can be signed without approval from all 3 trustees. Richard Caldwell finally spoke. "Who are the trustees?" "My father, me, and an independent land attorney." Celeste looked at my father like she had only just realized he was a person with legal power. Dad stood straighter. Preston's face had gone pale. Mr. Harlan turned to Richard. "You represented that secondary access was secured." Richard looked at Preston. Preston looked at Celeste. Celeste looked at me. That was when I understood wealth perfectly. It is a circle of people looking for someone else to blame. I said, "There will be no marriage license signed tonight." Preston snapped his head toward me. "Lila, no. Do not do this. You did it when you let your mother put my parents at the vendor table." Celeste's voice cracked through the room. "You are throwing away a marriage over a seating mistake." "No," I said. "I'm ending a transaction over fraud." That word landed hard. Fraud. The state development woman closed her folder. Mrs. Harlan picked up her clutch. Mr. Harlan looked at Richard and said, "We'll have counsel review the representations." That is rich person language for we are leaving before this explodes on us. The Harlans walked out first. Then Senator Bramwell. Then the state development people. Then half the front tables began checking phones, whispering, standing, creating that soft, expensive panic of people trying to exit without looking like they are fleeing. Preston came toward me. "Please, we can talk privately." I looked at him. "You had 2 years to talk privately. Today, I'm talking clearly." My father stepped between us. Not aggressively, just present. Preston stopped. Dad said, "Son, you don't get to ask her for quiet after your family used it against her." The ballroom went silent again. I handed the microphone back to the DJ. Then I took my mother's hand in one hand and my father's in the other. We walked out through the center aisle of that reception hall. Not the side door, not the kitchen exit. The center. Past the white roses, past the champagne wall, past table 1. When we passed Celeste, she whispered, "You'll regret humiliating this family." I stopped, turned, and said, "No, Celeste, you're regretting that I stopped being useful." Then we left. Outside, my mom started crying the second the air hit her face. My dad kept saying, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." I took his face in both hands. "Dad, you did nothing wrong." He closed his eyes. For the first time in my life, I saw my father let himself believe that. The fallout started before midnight. Maya called me at 10:43. "Lila, Harlan Capital's counsel just requested documentation on the trust." "Already?" "Already. And I received an email from Caldwell Development's attorney asking whether the trust would consider an emergency access easement." "What did you say?" I said the trustees were unavailable because one of them had just escaped a fraudulent wedding. I laughed for the first time that day. The marriage license was never signed. That mattered. In our state, no signed and filed license meant no marriage. Preston and I had exchanged vows, but legally, we were nothing. By morning, Crown Ridge was in trouble. Harlan Capital paused funding. Senator Bramwell's office issued a polite statement saying he had attended a private wedding reception and had no involvement in development negotiations. The state review team requested updated access documentation. Without Bennett Road, Caldwell Development had to redesign the emergency access route through wetlands, a process that could take 18 months and millions in mitigation. All because they thought a bus driver's road was easy to take. Preston called 37 times. I didn't answer. He emailed. First apology, then explanation, then blame, then threat. By the fourth email, Maya replied on my behalf. All communication regarding Bennett Road must go through council. All personal communication is unwelcome. Celeste sent flowers to my parents' house, white roses, the same kind from the wedding. My mother threw them in the trash and said, "Now they're seated properly." That was the first savage thing I had ever heard my mother say. I loved her more for it. 2 weeks later, Richard Caldwell asked for a meeting. Not Celeste, not Preston. Richard. We met in Maya's office. My father came with me. He wore his bus driver jacket even though he was retired by then. I think he did it on purpose. Richard looked smaller without the ballroom around him. "I owe you an apology," he said. Dad didn't answer. Richard continued. "What happened at the wedding was disgraceful. I should have intervened." "You should have," Dad said. Richard nodded. "Crown Ridge still needs access. We're prepared to make a generous offer." There it was. The real reason. I asked, "How generous?" $2 million for an easement. My father blinked. $2 million for the road they thought he was too simple to understand. Maya said, "The trust is conservation-based. Sale is not aligned with its purpose." Richard's jaw tightened. "Every trust has flexibility." I leaned forward. "This one has memory." He looked at me, confused. I said, "My grandfather cleared that road. My father maintained it. Your family tried to use my marriage to get it. There is no number that makes me forget that." Richard left with nothing. 3 months passed. Crown Ridge lost Harlan Capital, then another investor. Then the project was suspended pending redesign. Caldwell Development did not collapse, but it limped. Quietly. The way wealthy families like to suffer. Behind closed doors, with lawyers. Celeste resigned from the Lake Mercer Arts Board to focus on family. Everyone knew what that meant. Preston moved to Lexington for a while. Mutual friends said he was taking space. I hoped he found enough space to grow a spine. My parents became local legends, which embarrassed my dad deeply. People started honking when they saw his old bus in the driveway. Someone at the grocery store said, "Mr. Bennett, heard you own the most expensive dirt road in Kentucky." Dad came home horrified. Mom laughed until she cried. 1 year later, Bennett Road became something else. Not a resort entrance, not a development shortcut, a public nature trail. The trust partnered with the county schools. My dad helped design a safe drop-off area for buses. My mom sewed fabric trail markers with local kids during a summer program. Maya handled the legal work. I handled the land use approvals. On opening day, 3 yellow buses pulled up. Dad stood beside the trail sign in his old Route 17 jacket. The sign read, "Bennett Road Nature Walk, protected by the Bennett Family Conservation Trust, in honor of Samuel and Teresa Bennett, for every child who deserves a safe road home." Dad read it once, then again. Then he turned away and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. A 4th grader asked, "Were you really a bus driver?" Dad cleared his throat. "Still am, if you ask me." The kid said, "Cool." And just like that, one child gave my father more respect than the richest room I had ever walked out of. That was my table 1. Now tell me honestly, would you have walked out too? Comment below. And if this story hit you, subscribe for the next one.